Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. Hello everyone, and welcome to Dice Commando and the Commando Cast. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. So earlier today, the Dice Commando team had a theme tournament using an in-house design set and format dubbed Counterparts. Some things today went well, some didn't, but regardless, we had a lot of fun. Overall, the activity was a fantastic learning experience, though, for kind of thinking ahead for Destiny and card design and so on. So today what I want to talk about is the Counterparts experiment. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for episode 101 of the Commando Cast. So I'm coming to you from my office today, as it's just easier and more efficient given the number of images and such involved in today's discussion. Plus I have this really nifty scrolling show of the cards that will just kind of automatically play as we chat, which of course is not as easy to do in kind of the normal setting. So I will be activating that in a second for you to enjoy. So before we get into the discussion, just kind of a quick note and kind of an ask from me. Something weird happens to us gamers, especially Star Wars gamers, and by that I mean card gamers, when our discussion shifts to custom cards or fan cards. Like there's some switch that goes off in our heads, and the discussion can spin sideways and go out of control really fast. So for whatever that reason may be, I think most of you know what I'm talking about here, because we've almost all seen it before, right? So before we get into this, I really want to stress that the cards themselves that we were playing with this weekend, right, the cards we designed, they aren't the point of today's episode. So that's not what I want to discuss right today. I don't want to discuss the cards themselves or really even the set itself, but rather what we learned and where we failed, what I learned and what I failed in trying to kind of tweak some of the fundamentals of Destiny itself. So the motivation of this experiment was actually a discussion that took place a few months back on our Dice Commando team Discord. So I was playing around, trying to do like, well, Kit's 15 points. How come him and Luke doesn't work together? So I was doing some deck building with Luke and Kit and Mace and starter Obi after the Gandorkakron first hit. The problem was I kept finding that no matter what I did, I'd get about halfway through, because you guys know I like to write in a notebook, and that's just how I kind of build my deck sometimes. I'd get about halfway through doing it, and I'm just like, this is just not better than Raylo. Like, I just can't be better no matter what I do than Raylo. Nothing these guys bring is better than that. So I would end up dropping it, and I'd move on to something else, and I'd kind of come back to it, and I'd hit kind of the same roadblock. So what I did is I went to the Commando team, and I said, basically, what does a character have to be a legitimate middle contender, right? I mean, if you look at Master Luke, like he's got 12 health, he's really right on par with Iden. He's got some cool stuff going on, and he's just never really been a thing. And like why? Like, he's a good character. We just haven't been able to get him work. So does a character have to be insanely above curve? Is it really just all about the partner pairing? What do we have to do to have a middle be good? So after it was a great discussion. There was a lot of stuff planned around, and actually, ironically, that conversation actually ended up jumping into a dream card type thing. I mean, that seems to be just how it goes, right? But this is, what we were talking about, though, was, in my opinion, something that's kind of plagued Destiny really since the beginning. The game, in my opinion, at least way back in the day, was really fundamentally designed for 2-wide and 2-color team. And throughout the course of the game, though, we consistently see that wide and more colors is just better, right? I mean, I don't think that's a groundbreaking statement, right? And it's pretty obvious that in the last year plus, we've really only seen one middle team, other than Raylo, of course, which is specifically designed in that slot, right? We've really only seen one middle team consistently do well, and that's Iden Beckett, right? So, and it's kind of funny because that's almost what made that deck unique and kind of stand out. Was like everyone's kind of like, wow, it's a middle that's doing well, right? So, that's just kind of the thing, is you kind of look at it and you're like, man, yeah, there's not a lot of middle in Star Wars Destiny, right? So to that end, the Counterpart set was designed around a mechanic that I came up with called Counterpart X. The set as a whole was really designed to investigate if the Counterparts mechanic, could help grow Destiny beyond some of its current limitations, specifically to see if we could make the middle archetype viable without just simply power creeping the snot out of characters. And yeah, I think we've seen that even when you do power creep those 14 and 15 and 16 point characters, that sometimes that can still just end up feeding the 3Y pairings as it is, right? So let's go ahead. What I'm showing right now is the excerpt from the holocron I made for this format that on how Counterpart works, right? So the primary feature of this set is the keyword Counterpart X. A character with Counterpart X has its cost reduced by 1 build point if on the same team as the character names. So example, Obi-Wan Kenobi 22 has a build point value of 1411. Qui-Gon 23 has a build point value of 1316. This would total 30, of course, if you played them both Elite. But because each one of them has Counterpart X, it drops them by 2, which allows them to be 28 points, so you could play them with a plot, lightsaber mastery, or whatever, right? So that's really just how this works. Some of the pairings we have, they only have Counterpart on one side, whatever it may be, however we needed to get there. And just so we're clear, guys, this was very much an experiment, right? The idea behind this mechanic, or at least the thought process behind this mechanic, was that it would allow for the design of overly efficient characters that were inherently too strong for their point value. But the idea being that with this mechanic, we could offset that kind of built-in overpowered strength by the fact that we can control the partners that they play with. So, by directly saying you have to play with this guy to be a 15-point character, it allows us a lot more control over the pairings, right? So that was the theory behind it. So, for example, if I could, if I could build a balanced character at 16 points, but have him play at 15 under controlled circumstances, would that help get us where we want, which is to play that middle again? So that was really the idea, right? So alternatively, right, it would follow such as so I'm saying, right, with the 16 to make 15s, or you could in theory play 2 15s, or like in the case we saw above of Obi and Qui-Gon, in theory you could also play 2 middles that just weren't good enough, but then you could bring a plot that might help them get playable, really is what it falls into. And then lastly, and I think this is the cool part, is it makes it a lot easier to push thematic pairings and teams, which is something that a lot of, again, except for Reylo, a lot of the top decks in this format kind of really lack. So, because it would make sense to counterpart Chewie with Han, or Obi with Qui-Gon, or whatever it may be, right? So you could bring thematicness, you could over-push some areas and try to get in that middle again. And the idea was just to see what we could do with Destiny, right? So, also, just bringing up this idea was kind of inspired a little bit, actually a lot, by the Spectres that we saw in Covert Missions. I really liked what was done there. The plot's -1, again, was controlled by character limitations. Kanan's -1, the same way, it was controlled to a lesser extent because you just needed 1, but he had to be played with a Spectre to get that point limitation. It was a really good concept, and I felt it was pretty well executed. I mean, the Spectres by no means are like dominating the meta, right? But they're bringing a 32-point team that is basically not dominating meta, so they did a good job controlling that and keeping things in check. And I did bring this exact concept actually to a couple of the teams that we have in the set. I have a Rogue One team, a 3-wide Rogue One team. I have Inferno. We have 501st. All of these factions use a -1 plot to help their team comps work. But I started to realize real quick that doing it this way kind of over-stifled creativity, mainly because it blocked the option of using a plot, right? Because you're using your plot to do the -1. Well, now you can't bring a plot. So it really, aside from putting, you may bring 2 plots to the game or something like that, which then again is still kind of in that stifled creativity because you know what you're limited to do. So the next step then, basically from that, came to figure out how to build in Kanan's ability in a way that, quite frankly, it didn't eat up half of the available text on the character. So it just made sense to go with just a generic type keyword, and that's really where counterparts come from. So let's go ahead and turn on the slideshow so you guys can just watch those. It'll just play through as we are talking, and it should just cycle through in order of the numbers wherever it started from. So let's talk about how things actually went. The first observation I had from today was really the social experiment portion, which that's not really what I was going for, because obviously our DC team crew is a good bunch of people. Most of these guys enjoy the game itself and in general steer away from the broken and NPA type stuff as it is, right? I mean, when we do our casual games, we're not seeing a ton of broken stuff. So, and that was pretty consistent, right? Almost all of the tourney participants embraced the concept and tried to at least use one counterpart type interaction and pairing in their teams. Again, to be clear, we didn't give anybody any direction on what to do because we wanted to see what could happen. But most people ended up using the new stuff in some fashion, specifically around the counterparts, because there's some guys you can play without counterparts. So there was a couple individuals, of course, that jumped on some broken interactions just to prove that they were broken, which I mean that's fine. That's really no different than the large community. So, like I said, from that aspect, most of this was kind of par from the course, as if we had released like a normal set to a normal larger population, where some set of the players immediately go for the broken, which then cascades down to the other players, right? So the big finding overall to me was that, I mean, the objective at least of the set was to make a favorable environment for middle. But what we saw was that by and large, middle pairings were still not heavily favored. 3 wides, even though they weren't always rainbow, and even so many of them were on theme, still seemed to be pretty prevalent. Part of this was caused by a pretty big miss on my side, right? One of the characters, a small guy, Dio, Iden's droid, he was just flat out broken. And again, this was my bad, but what happened there is when you have a small point character with an overpowered ability, it just feeds the wide deck options, right? So this was pretty par for the course again with like a normal set release when we see something that's just bad, hadn't been play tested enough, or it's just a suboptimal pairing, right? So admittedly, right, that character did skew some of the deck results because it was just so desirable to run him in the wides. But even so, I was really surprised at the lack of 2 wide pairings. So I was afraid that some of them had actually been, like, some of these pairings, I was afraid that I'd pushed them too far. And I think that was one of the big learnings is, like, I thought I'd pushed some of these guys too far, and they still weren't good enough to beat out a wide pairing, right? So the one I was worried about the most is what I'm showing right now, which is Baze and Churret. So I basically pulled Baze and Churret, their original printings. I pulled them, right? Remember in Infinite they have been reduced. So I put both of I gave Baze 1 additional health because I think he deserved it. But I gave them each counterpart so they could run with a plot. And I was afraid these guys were going to be overpowered. And in my opinion, at least mathematically, this pairing was probably the strongest of all the ones that we created. And only one player brought these guys. I had a Han and Chewie pairing, which I'm showing right now. I felt this was not only really cool pairing, also really thematic, but they worked together, and I think they're pretty good. Now, do note on this that the reason that if you look at Chewie's die, you'll note that he's a 13-15. So I had to kind of play around with the non-elite die, or I had to play around with all the die values. Han's also 2 points. I had to do that to avoid being able to use Tribe because I think that would have been broken, right? But Han and Chewie, nobody played these guys, which surprised me. They were all going for other stuff. So, and then the last, I mean, again, there's many others here, but the last pairing I want to talk about was this is another one that I kind of added late on because I wanted something a little more in the later movies. So I used Poe and Finn. I was also afraid this was too strong, but barely anyone even really ever mentioned him. And this pairing is, for really lack of a better description, it's the Poe and Finn that we have today, right? Big Poe and then Legacy's Finn that we have today. But they were adjusted with Counterpart so that you wouldn't have to run Solidarity like you do. Now, I had walked back Poe a little bit because I didn't want him to have piloting in this because I thought that would be insane. But if you look at the sides on here, you got a 2-gun, a 2-gun, a 2 indirect, a 2, a +2, and a 3 indirect. Like, there's some serious just rollout natural damage potential on these guys, even disregarding the abilities. Finn's still mathematically one of the better characters, or one of the better die sides in the game. And, so I think this is a pretty strong team, but we still didn't see him. So 3 wide still reigns supreme, right? I mean, that's a takeaway. So even in an environment where we were putting a ton of extra energy into making 2 wides decent, it just seemed that the larger pools and more die options are better. So, ultimately, I mean, I don't know that the experiment failed, right? I don't think that what we did was bad, but we did not succeed in the goal, which was trying to make middle playable, right? And you guys know I've said it many times before. I like Raylo. I think it's a great thing for the game. It'll probably end up being, from the FFG side of this game, it'll probably end up being like kind of their capstone design for the game. I would think, like, it was pretty well done. But I think it's almost ruined the middle pairing, because comparatively, especially for mono blue, right? Especially for mono blue, with the exception of running Kylo 2 because Raylo's prevalent, and by that I mean like the Kylo Dooku rule of 2, right? Aside from that, like, can you do better than Raylo middle? And I don't think you can. And then we did obviously run up against that big learning that hopefully the Renewed Hope Committee can take into account going forward as well, that by making, even under controlled circumstances, by making the middles a little better, all it really did was serve to fuel 3 wide options. So I don't know, like I said, we failed in our objective, but I think we learned a lot from it. So that's kind of what that's pretty much it for today. I just kind of wanted to share what we did, how the set worked. To be clear, I don't plan on releasing these cards to anybody, right? All the DC team guys, we made it on TTS, but I don't intend on releasing. Like, there's no value in doing it, right? Some of these cards are not mathematically sound, some of them have design issues, but we were really releasing it more in a vacuum to just kind of try and test the waters and see what we could do, because then that would serve as a jumping off point for actually maybe trying to fix stuff in the future, right? So ideas are ideas, and it was great to test, and just kind of wanted to report back with those learnings. So let me know what you guys are thinking. Not as much specifically about the cards or other cards you'd want to see. That's not really where I'm going here. But what do we need to do as a community to make fundamental destiny again? I guess that's overarching the question, right? I mean, I thought we had a stab here, and it didn't really work. And I don't think the answer is more power creep on the middles, because I think that just ends up hurting everything overall. So anyway, let me know what you guys are thinking. Thanks for joining me for the discussion today. If nothing else, go Commando.